Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is our panel for day 2 of the Manhood Summit, focusing on our men of color in our community. And specifically, this workshop is equipping our young men with the right armor. So, really the heart and the soul of this panel with these gentlemen that we've got gathered with us is to think about what our young men of color in the state of Wisconsin are going through, particularly at the K through 12 level, as well as the university level. I've got some great distinguished guests here with me today. I'm really excited to have them. Some are very old friends, and then some I'm getting to know a lot better now. But I'm going to just give folks an opportunity to introduce themselves. I'll start out by introducing me. My name is Joe Maldonado. I sit on the City Council in Fitchburg, and I'm also with University of Wisconsin Division of Extension. I'm the Positive Youth Development Program Manager, so I get to oversee some of the work that occurs with young people throughout the state. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists one by one. I'm going to go ahead and start with Dr. Daniels. Can you just go ahead and give a brief introduction of who you are?
Sure. I'm Jack Daniels. I'm the president of Madison College, Madison. There's a few things I'd just like to say as part of my intro. I just didn't wake up one morning and became president of Madison College. And there's a journey that I've been on. I grew up in Chicago, on the South Side, and I went to, at that point in time, was segregated schools. And you learn a lot from folks who look like you and how you actually handle yourself going in the future. My parents were very strong in terms of education to get you to where you need to go. And I followed their advice and suggestions through college as well as through graduate school. I also had an opportunity to serve in the armed forces. And as I am a veteran, understanding really racism from a different perspective. And when you start to look at what was happening with soldiers, especially in the Vietnam War era, and how they were treated once they came back, I had lots of experience with that as well. I have committed myself over my higher education experience to really focusing in on those populations who have been disengaged from the process, who have been impoverished, who in fact have had not the access that leads to success. And it's the important part for me is to encourage, support, and help those folks go along their way, their pathway, as mentors have done for me over the years and continue to do to this day. So it's good to be here. I thank Henry for putting this together. This has been an outstanding 2 days, but I think it's tremendously important for us to really sit down and talk about our men of color, the issues and the barriers, and then how we can be assisted.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. I know in what I heard you say, I really appreciated that the way you started out. You talked about your family, your community, and the assets that they brought to the table. Because I think oftentimes, with people of color, we're often viewed in a lens of deficit, and a lot of the jewels that we've got are within us and within our community and those that came before. So I really appreciate that feedback. I'm going to go ahead and pivot to Dr. Carlton Jenkins. If you could give a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, most definitely. Let me say, first of all, I appreciate the visionary actions of Mr. Henry Sanders to pull this whole thing together, right? And to have a conversation for real about men of color and what does it mean. And I say this everywhere I go. I'm 5 generations from being a slave. My grandmother's grandmother was a slave, and her mother was a sharecropper. And my grandmother did domestic work from individuals who were part of the Klan. So anyway, and as such, my mother did not graduate from high school. She went to 10th grade. My father went to 3rd grade, and my grandmother never saw school. And it was important for them, for us to do better. My mother had 7 children, and I was the one to graduate from college. And the story is that when I graduated, my family came down with 9 cars and 2 dogs to Mississippi Valley State University because it was a family affair. I didn't make it through college by myself. It was my brothers, my sisters, everyone pushing and saying, and actually my older siblings, you will graduate, even though they had not. They said, you will. So my story is a family story for real, and just being a project kid, coming out of the projects, and just so pleased to be here with all these young individuals who I know that they're going to go on to do great things. And so graduated from Mississippi Valley State, and then I came here to Madison, came to Wisconsin where I started teaching in Beloit, and then went to Madison where I doubled out with my master's and my PhD. And much like Dr. Daniels, my whole life has been about wanting to give access to others, because I saw the reality of my family members not having the same access as I had, but I was also a student athlete, and that gave me a little bit more. When you're coming from the state of Alabama, that means a lot when you're an athlete. But I realized that athletics was not the only way, because of one of my mentors saying to me, you have more contributions than just that pigskin. So I want you to start concentrating more on your academics. So I'm just pleased to be here with Dr. O'Connor and Dr. Daniels today. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir. Continuing that theme about family, that's just a beautiful visual of, 9 cars coming down to celebrate you. It's not just your effort, it's the effort of the village. So appreciate you being here. I'm going to pivot to my old friend. We've known each other for a good 20 years. Dr. David O'Connor from the Bad River Nation. I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and tell us about who you are, what you do.
Certainly. First and foremost, good afternoon to everyone. I just want to make a big shout out to Madison 365 and Henry Sanders for this opportunity and creating this space for myself and others to be here today. In terms of who I am, my name is Bagwagni Wid, or David J. O'Connor. Bagwagni Wid is my traditional Ojibwe name, something I've been using a lot more, taking ownership of that over time. When I translate into English, it means broken wing. And when I break it down, what does that name mean? Bagwagni Wid, it means he overcomes. And so I always think that's a very fitting name in terms of things that, challenges and things that I've persevered through to be where I'm at in this space with you. And so I always like to first and foremost thank my parents, my first teachers, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, a lot of my cousins who I look up to, even not only historically, but even to this day. Many other community members who shaped me, elders, helped give me guidance. And so always thankful for also those educators who went a little extra step sometimes to help me grow as a student. And I was, I'm very thankful for all those folks who help contribute to me being in this space or having these opportunities in life. And because it could have been the other way around. And so I was, as I was sharing early on with some folks, I've always had a lot of mentors, a lot of folks who helped guide me to where I'm at today, but I still had those mentors and other mentors, both younger and older than myself. And so I'm always thankful to have those opportunities. And so, me, I'm a very proud member and originally from the Bad River Band Lake Spirit Chippewa. So I grew up on a reservation. And so coming on to Madison, Wisconsin, felt like to me, it was like going to New York City or LA from northern Wisconsin. It was very overwhelming. First couple of weeks I was on campus, I wanted to leave. It was difficult, when you don't see people like yourself or having some similar backgrounds. But I also think back to I was very thankful to have some of those folks, either both students, other fellow students, or other faculty and staff in that space to help encourage me to take one day at a time. And before I knew it, I was on the 5-year path. I graduated. Something I'm always been very proud of is when I got both my undergrad and graduate, I was the first person in my entire family ever to have a associate's degree or higher. And so when I graduated, the first thing I did is give my mom and dad my diploma. And I remind them, although it may say my name on there, it actually says all of our names on there. And so I wanted them to have that. And it meant more for me to give it to them and for me to keep it. And so always real thankful for that space. And although my parents are no longer here with me, they're always in spirit. And so always help and guide me in different things as I make this journey with my own family now, as being a father and a husband myself. So thank you.
Love. So, I appreciate you all telling me your stories and your journeys. I know one thing that I sort of heard across the board was guidance and mentorship. Let's hone in on that a little bit. Can each of you talk a little bit about, some folks in your life, whether they be familiar or other who provided that guidance, that leadership, and that mentoring for you, and talk a little bit about how they did it. Let's start with you, Dave.
As I mentioned earlier, some of the folks that I really recognize right away is my mom and dad. My mom, she always taught me how show me and help guide me, understand what does it mean to be a man in this, how to be a man. But my dad always taught me how to be a Anishinaabe. And so I was always thankful for those opportunities to understand how I can be a better person, not only as when I get older, but when I was in the family. What does it mean to be a middle child? What does it mean to be David in that family? And so I'm always thankful for that, for those relationships that I had with my parents, first and foremost, and other extended family members as well. But I think about, strong mentorships. For when I first got one of my first jobs out of graduate school, I had two people in particular. One person is unfortunately no longer with us. She passed away a few years ago. Her name was Jackie DeWalt, and she used to be overseeing the people program. And so she gave me an opportunity to work with the people program, and I had a lot of opportunity to learn and listen and understand how to be a better educator every day. And seeing from afar, both from afar as well as close up, in terms of how I can work with students to have them see places like Madison or other college opportunities as being their own. And another person who I like to mention right away comes to mind. So I had an opportunity to work with as well. His name was Carlos Reyes. Used to work at admissions for a good number of years. Was on campus for a long time, about 30 plus years, and helped me understand about how we do outreach and recruitment with students. And it's, the idea behind it was not just to get students into the university, but also make sure that they come there and be successful, and making sure they have the right opportunities or be pushed or being guided to having some of those resources on campus that I was very fortunate to have. Being a very proud former used to be known as a TRIO, now known as a SEAL, a Center for Educational Opportunity on campus. I was very thankful for all those folks as well, either getting tutoring or advice, or just being someone who I could just talk to about personal things that had nothing to do with school. So like a lot of times, I think when, from my own perspective, just for me, I think coming into that space, I had the tools to be successful academically. Sometimes it's other things that maybe prohibit or limit maybe sometimes success that is outside of that. And so I'm always been very thankful for the folks that always step up in different places, even when you don't expect it. And so sometimes it could be that little extra, hey, can I just have a conversation with you? A telephone call or whatever the case may be, stop by my office, or I'll meet you where you need to be. And so those are little things like that really made a big difference in my life. And to be honest with you, I can give a list of many different names of people who really help guide me, and I've always been, but the main thing I always take from it is that, there's always someone there to help me. Always been. And even to this day, I get a lot of assistance, a lot of help, and I'm very thankful for the colleagues I work with or other folks from across the state that help me become a better, not only educator, but a better person.
Thank you. So, Dr. Jenkins, I'd love to hear, about your transition from, the South, which often, gets a rap for its, historic racism, to Wisconsin, which I think oftentimes our historic racism is swept under the rug and not necessarily highlighted the way that it really is in reality. As you transitioned up here into your career, who were the folks that really, looked out for you and provided mentorship for you?
Yeah, I really like the way you framed it too, coming from the South up here. As I said, Alabama is not in the United States. It's its own United States. But the more I look at Alabama now, the more I see America looking like Alabama, to be very, very frank with you. It's very overt down south. And I see things happen across our country in different places. I'm coming back here from Minnesota. And I think it all starts with the emphasis of the foundation of America. And coming up, my mentor, my dad, and my three older siblings, my brothers, they made me very aware of situations. And so coming up here, my dad was able to even talk about it. He was a big union guy, and he was able to talk to me a lot about that. Coming into education, going into Beloit, Wisconsin, I was very fortunate to have Dr. McGregory, Mr. McGregor, who was the principal, Jerry Kinney, and the household name in Wisconsin, so to say, and Dr. Elsie. I had a lot of educators around me, being an educator, who were more senior, who just took me under their wings and said, hey, Dr. Blandon, you're going to be an administrator. And I'm like, no, I just want to be a teacher right now. And shortly after, sure enough, there I was sitting in administration. And then Dr. Rosa Smith picked me up from there. She was the former superintendent of the year in the state of Wisconsin, the African-American female, and we've been together since life. She still serves as my mentor today. And I, just like Dr. O'Connor said, there are so many people who have mentored me in my life, in particular in the field of education, because the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know anything when I started out. I thought I was going to take over the world based on what I had learned. But then I realized there was so much more to learn and so much more to do. So I've been very blessed. And then even coming over to the university, just having many mentors there at the university. But when I first went to UW-Madison, from my experience, I didn't see anyone in my classes that looked like me. So Dr. O'Connor, I get that wholeheartedly until the end of my class. And that was, it's just something we've had to endure. But being that I was from the South, I give credit to that. It had prepared me to come up here and navigate the systems. And through my whole time, I just thought about, I have to get through here so others can follow and so that I can make a larger contribution. And I'll never forget Dr. Jelando Jackson saying to me that, asking me what was going to be my contribution to society once I get an education, not just to be an educator, but that was at a higher level, being an administrator, superintendent too.
Right. So not just taking, not just learning, but also being able to give back that contribution.
Being able to give back. That was the bottom line. And that's my mission. Like right now, my philosophy is to put the communities in the schools in the community. I just think through my experience, we were missing a lot by not bringing the whole community, the parents and, the other mentors out there in the community, the football coaches, or just co-curricular advisors, and bringing them in. They may not be regular teachers, but man, do they influence what's happening to children. And so coming up, I'll never forget Coach Pyback, who didn't have a formal education, but boy, he talked to us all the time about being disciplined in everything that we do, and we're going to have great returns in life.
That's right. And that's going back to, what all of you have said, which is, really our gems and our wisdom are in our community, in our family, and the people that are with us, that, regardless of whether they have sort of the formal titles, they've got those assets to be able to really bring to us. Dr. Daniels, how about you? Experience in the military, experience, working with students, non-traditional students, growing up in the South Side of the Chicago. What, who are the folks that guided you along the way, and what did they teach you?
Well, like my colleagues, my parents were my first mentors, and they supported me through thick and thin. They continued to push me forward. And I thought that was, when you think about mentors, I always would think through that. But in the early early in my life, and I'm going to say around 7, 8 years old, the YMCA had a program. I don't know if they still have it. It was called the Y Indian Guys. And that program actually was fathers and sons. And this was around Black fathers and their sons. And they met every month. They would talk about issues that would affect them as males. They would bring in leaders, Black leaders, so that we would understand, some of the issues that they were facing, but also role models. And I remember everything from attorneys, from accountants, from shoe builders to a professional football players. And they would really talk to us for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and that connection and understanding who we were. And that was so impactful and impressive on me. And you start to think through, okay, what would I want to do? What would I like to do? And then you go through that point of, well, who's actually going to support you? And I always keep in mind my parents, because that's always in my mind, being pushed. I went to a undergraduate institution where there were only 3 African-American folks. And in a town where the Klan and the Birches would go around the courthouse. And understanding what that really meant for me, because there was no other person there that you could actually relate to. I've always probably been in predominantly white institutions. And in graduate school, I saw no one that looked like me. And when you talk about mentors, it just didn't have it at that point in time. And then as I was at Chicago State University for some time, as a researcher, a VP told me that if you wanted to really move up in the higher education world, you got to go get the paper. And the paper is the PhD. And I went and did that. I then started a career with the 2-year institutions. And I was in Oakland, California. And then I had a mentor tell me, if you really want to understand higher ed and the students in higher ed, you need to be doing full-time teaching. So I left administration and became a full-time psychology instructor and made my way and got tenure. But then you start to think, are my skills and talents, how can I better use my skills to help others? And, I became a president. Not immediately, but over a period of time. But one of the things about before I became a president, I was a part of an institute called the Lakin Institute. The Lakin Institute was named after an African-American president in LA that was to provide support to folks who wanted to become a president. And this was a part of what was called the President's Roundtable. In the President's Roundtable, the membership was all the African-American presidents of 2-year institutions in the country. It was a part of the President's Roundtable. Well, in the Lakin Institute, we heard from many presidents who would talk about their role, their pathway, the barriers that they would have, and you become that network. And that network then is a mentoring network. And that continues. I chaired the President's Roundtable and pushed the Lakin Institute. And I'm entering my 24th year as a college president. And those mentors, many of them who have died, But those who are still were around when mentor me early, they still mentor me. I call them. There may be a decision that I might be struggling over, and they give me advice about that. And I think it's important to maintain that type of connection, because the mentors, if they're true to you, they never leave you. You can feel them, but they never leave you. And that has really pushed me. And for me to also mentor others is a key part of what I do as well.
So I heard a lot of themes in there. One interesting piece that you said was sort of about your childhood and the concept of group mentoring. I think that's really, really important. That's one of the things I saw, in the 3MSP mentoring program at Madison College. It's like there were these one-on-one relationships, but then we would all get together as a group and really learn from one another. And I think I actually heard Mr. Henry Sanders speak at one of those events, and just in that 20 minutes learned a college course curriculum full of knowledge. Let me talk and pivot to what's going on with our young men today, because that's really what we're here to dive into. Dr. Jenkins, can you tell us about, you came in during a COVID pandemic into this district, and obviously you've been in administration and been in education for a really long time, but let's talk about this present moment. What are our young men of color right now going through from your vantage point? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I always have to acknowledge that we're in the middle of the second pandemic, which is a health pandemic. The justice pandemic has been going on since the infancy of America's start, and that continues right now. And we see that in the community. Just you can't separate the two with the health pandemic and the social justice and justice per se. We were the first district in Minnesota to close on March 13th when I was there as superintendent. We had a case, and what we saw immediately, there were many students not doing well before COVID-19, but the whole pandemic has illuminated it, particularly for families of color and throughout America. And so we're seeing a high level of stress and isolation. So we're having to really focus a lot on the socio-emotional piece. And you're seeing families economically, employment-wise being impacted. You're seeing families having to move because there is no employment. There's no more employment for their families, so they're having to move with other families. So now you're seeing multi-generations, multiple families moving together. That's one side of the story. But we're also seeing our young men of color taking on some serious responsibilities, which is a good thing in the household because the parents single parent may have lost their income, and the young males taking on a job, more responsibility, helping out the family. So this pandemic, I think, has done a couple things. Sure, there's been hardships, but there's also been a growing together of the family unit. We're all in this tough time together. We really are. And so, but in terms of the academic loss and academic gains, it's there. We have some students who may not have Wi-Fi connections throughout the country, not just in MMSD, and they've been impacted by that greatly. But the students who have had an opportunity to get on consistently, we've seen some thrive. We've seen some of our staff do some amazing things to keep children engaged, in particular, some students of color. And I'm hearing from some of the parents say, hey, can we do something like this after COVID is over? So it's been some definitely challenging times, but there have also been some opportunities, and I think it has really illuminated we cannot go back to what we just come out of. We had many children for various reasons were not engaged in school at a high level, and we are seeing some who are being re-engaged, but we still know we have a disproportionate number of students of color, particularly males of color, who are still in need of additional support. And this whole mentorship thing is real. Right now, those we've been able to connect with mentors have been able to navigate it a little bit better, a lot better actually, than those who have been in isolation. They can't see the friends. There's like no co-curricular going on. We're getting back to a better space right now. But I tell you, this has been a heavy and a long journey. In my 30 plus years, we have not experienced this, what we're experiencing right now. But I'm seeing some positives come out of it. But I'm definitely knowing coming out of it, which we are now moving forward, we're going to have to pay attention to the socio-emotional. We're going to have to make sure we take some of the things that we've learned to continue to try to accelerate where our students are and make them feel valued. And I think during COVID, the opportunities that we've had to engage critically, we see our students. We see the whole family now. We see the whole community. And that's been powerful. Whereas I don't think there was that direct recognition of our young people or their families as a whole unit.
Right. Yeah, I can't go through a meeting now without my daughter or my son or somebody yelling or an outburst across the house. You mentioned students thriving, and you also mentioned some educators doing some really innovative things. Do you want to maybe highlight just an example of one of each? I'd love to hear a story. Yeah,
most definitely. We had some students who had perhaps been bullied in school, or they just weren't engaged, and the parents are telling me now, or they're medically fragile. They were, various things that they had going on that's not going on now. They haven't been sick one time during the virtual learning. They haven't been bullied one time. They've engaged. Their grades are really going up. And one young student, well, several of them have actually said, but this one young guy said, and I can go to the restroom anytime I get ready now, and he was also talking about not getting in trouble. And that's the one beautiful thing about virtual. And we're trying to figure that out when we go back to in person. Why do we have to have the suspensions we have? Not only in Madison, but across the nation. If we're not suspending the students now, why do we have to suspend them? What's the issue there? And so then I think about Kids Nation, Miss Iris Patterson. I have to call her out. I think she's one of the most innovative teachers we have in the country. And I think the things that's happening in her classroom virtually, one day we didn't have school. We called school off, right? So she wasn't there. She went back the next day to find out that her students all had attended on the day off at 100%, and they completed the project because they're used to working with one another virtually. So that the teacher wasn't there. One student just took the lead. They were all there, and they just completed the project. But we see other staff too doing many innovative things. And one thing I definitely don't want to leave out when I say the two pandemics, during these times in the schools, we're seeing a lot of pushing around social justice, and our staff and our students and our families are all coming together and realizing too the inequities, the disparities that we're having from food to everything else. Our district has stepped up, the community has stepped up, and a lot of people helping with that, but just valuing one another now. That's what I see happening within the schools quite a bit.
That's right. Shout out to Dr. Patterson. Her, myself, and Dr. O'Connor all went to college together, and I think we all met at the Student of Color retreat my freshman year at UW-Madison. Yeah.
So she's amazing there, right?
Oh, yeah, she is amazing. Yeah, we did. I think we did a duet of the Fugees during karaoke.
Wow.
Let me pivot to you, Dr. O'Connor. In your intro, you talked a lot about your journey, but you didn't talk about your professional career. I'd love to, hear you tell us a little bit about what you do at Department of Public Instruction. Tell us about, the populations that you work with and the outreach that you do, and what you're sort of seeing throughout the state, especially with our indigenous communities.
Certainly. So, in terms of my role at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, I have my title is I'm the American Indian Studies Consultant. So a lot of work I engage in around state is for teaching, learning about our First Nations histories, cultures, and tribal sovereignty. which is often referenced as Act 31, which is a state requirement that all school districts and all students that attend our public schools must learn about our First Nations histories, cultures, and communities, and sovereignty and treaties. And the other part of that is also the education of our Native students. And so the other hat I also have the opportunity to wear is being a grant director for an initiative called the Network, where I have an opportunity to engage and work around equity and other culturally sponsored practices. And one of the things that a lot of work I do, I was still focused in terms of that, is making sure that we're providing opportunities for not only our students, but our families that we work with, as well as our communities and nations. I always think if we're going to address some of these things that we see in our communities, it's not just, it needs to be looked at from systemic. And so a lot of times, it's not just put all the burden on education and then let it fold there. It needs to be like what Dr. Jenkins was talking about earlier. Needs to be that opportunity for the education seen reciprocal with both the communities and school, they need each other in many different respects. And so I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to work a lot of times hands-on with our nations directly, our tribal nations in our state, especially some of the issues that we see. That a lot of things that we see that we're talking about here in MMSD as example or elsewhere. Especially we see those in our rural communities where accessibility to resources can be limited. So a lot of times, especially in the pandemic right now, we're talking about having access to issues around Wi-Fi access. And if they do have Wi-Fi access, how stable is it? And so a lot of times when, if your entire course is on that day, or you have 3 or 4 students in that household, or even parents or family members who need access to Wi-Fi, that could be it can tax it a little bit in terms of how it can be used, I guess you could say. And so the stability of that, I guess you could say. And so from going back to the question that you asked in terms of my role, is to make sure that I work with folks internally that I have the opportunity to work with, to make sure that we can provide those resources or opportunities for our families that we work with every day. Because it's our job. We're here to serve the state of Wisconsin. And so to make sure that we serve all our students, all our families, all our communities, and all of our nations that call Wisconsin home.
All right. So I want to ask a follow-up on that. Both Dr. Daniels and Dr. Jenkins talked about some of the systemic racism that comes into play, and how it intersects with the pandemic. Our nation, our state has done a lot of harm to Indigenous people. And you're in a role with the state of Wisconsin. How does what's going on with our Native youth right now during the pandemic intersecting with some of that history?
One of the things it's making sure we give voice to them, and not only be seen at the table, but sit at the head of the table. And I think a lot of times, growing up, and I want to speak for myself as example. A lot of times I always feel like you had to always push even that extra step just to be heard. And I just don't want to have our students just be heard. I want to have them be listened to. I always remind people being heard and listened to are 2 different things. And so a lot of times I want to make sure that, the issues that we see for our students, our communities are being addressed individually. So that's what I'm trying to say is if, what is one issue for one community may not be the same issue for another. They have different needs and different things they'd like to see addressed. And so for me, it's making sure they have that open dialogue or conversation where it's not just one-sided, where it's me assuming something when I don't live there. So even as example, I was born and raised in Bad River, the reservation. If I want to know about issues or things that are impacting those communities, I'd rather talk to the people who live there today. And I don't want to take away from myself. My heart and soul is always up in that community. But I live here in Madison now. That's where I call home. So my children call home. And so for me, I'd always want to ask directly with the folks that live in those communities, asking them directly what they like to see more of, or like to see, or even ask them what things that we can partner on. Because a lot of times, the reason why I asked that question as well, because they bring a lot to the table as well. And I want to make sure that, they help me grow in terms of understanding how I could better meet needs, not only for them, but for others I have an opportunity to work with. And so you talk about mentorship, things that we've been talking about throughout our time here today already. I always believe that I always take, every time I have an opportunity to interact with someone, regardless, even if it's for 5 minutes or if it's a long-term relationship, I promise you I always learn something new every time I walk away from that conversation. And so even being in this space where I feel a very honor to listen to Dr. Jenkins, Dr. Daniel's talk, there's a couple of things that have already been shared by both that give me some good food for thought on how I could be a better, not only a professional, but a better human being, especially.
I appreciate that. Mentorship is bi-directional, and that's something we should definitely emphasize in this panel. What have young people taught you?
Patience. The understanding of patience. Be more patient. I'm very proud. You're talking earlier about children being on your camera sometimes or yelling something when you're having a conference or a training or whatever. I'm a father to a 5 and 3-year-old, and every day they let me know that they're excited about being in a space with me, but that sometimes even when I tell them to be a little quiet because dad's on a call or whatever, that's when they seem to get a little louder. I don't know what that's about. And when I'm just sitting here doing emails or other things where I'm not engaged in conversation, they're real quiet then. Then I get a little scared on something else because I'm always wondering what they're doing. But my kids just teach me every day. My daughters really do teach me. Even though I'm guiding them to be better people and helping them grow, they're helping me grow every day. And I really do mean that from the bottom of my heart. They are truly my world. Every time I jump into a conversation, like when I started, I did a training early this morning, or when I jumped on this conference call for here, the first 2 people I thought about was my girls. And when I finish this conversation, I guarantee I'll be thinking about my 2 girls, which then expands to everybody else that I have an opportunity to connect with or work with every day.
Right on. I'm going to take a moment to just tell any folks watching this in the audience to submit your questions. We're going to be taking audience questions pretty soon. Dr. Daniels, tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Madison College world with our young men and also our older men who are coming back. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but maybe you can expand on it.
This has been a very tough year. March 15th of last year, we, for all practical purposes, closed down. Though we still had some in-person classes, everything was remote. We walked into the fall term, and either they were fully remote or we had hybrid classes. Maybe 5% may have been in person. And the same thing for the spring. So what we experienced here was also a 10% decline in enrollment. But the more significant portion of that was the decline in the male population. Because our decline went from 48, 49% male population to 40. And many of those folks, the majority of those folks, were males of color. And so for the last few months, we have been really trying to look at, how do we in fact re-engage ourselves with the community? And several things that we did outside of calling and putting things on social media and wherever we could is to make the comment that we're here for you. That has been, difficult at best. Many of our students were so used to, because their history has been in person. They didn't have an online history. And the ability to connect with that instructor has been what their experience has been, but now it's in a different way to connect. You also learn from what is happening with the families, and we talk about food insecurity. We also got to talk about housing, and we've got to talk about what are the legal issues that have come up that they need assistance with. And we try, to address some of that through our own legal services and also through our own food bank. But to get people re-engaged is where we are right now. We're called a technical college. I see it more as a community college, because the community is where we need to be. The need of the community is much greater. How can we serve it? When we built Goodman South Campus, it was based on the need of that community. And we were always focused on the need of the community. But I'm encouraged. And I'm encouraged because when I look at the summer, and I'm seeing some substantial growth during the summer as of this point in time. I'm also seeing some growth in folks who are taking fall classes. We have several programs, you've already mentioned some of them, Joe, that focuses in on folks of color. We have a program that focuses in on Latinx and African American males, and we're broadening that. And really trying to not just mentor, but to help them through whatever barriers that they have. Because if we can surround them with the services that we have, I think you're going to find greater success for those students. And we're working towards that. This has caused the whole college now to be involved in what is equity and what is inclusion, and what's fairness and what is respect. And what we've done, I think, is monumental over the last 10, 11 months. Because right now we have 7 schools in the college. Every school has their equity and inclusion plan that's aligned with the college's plan. But it's not a plan that just sits on a shelf or something that you can tell the accrediting committee, oh, well, we got this great plan. It has benchmarks. It has assessments in there. It has activities in there. And we have to follow that. And we have created that. We also, because we're so community focused, we have created a whole area of community relations. And in that community relations, there's a focus on the 4 major ethnic groups in Madison: African American, Latinx, the Native American, and the Hmong community. And there's a liaison for each one of those communities. And they report directly to me. Because I want to ensure that that relationship to the community is strengthened. And that as we strengthen that, we'll actually be able to serve the community much better than what we have in the past, and understanding folks learning what is best for them, and really having a very good partnership with the community, as opposed to we're here so you can show up. We've got to do the type of outreach that we have come to know works.
So one of my very first jobs out of college was I actually worked at Madison College South when it was in the Villager, and I taught a course for folks that were in Huber that were in the minimum release jail about a mile away over on Rimrock. I walk up every day, take GED class in the morning, take my class in the afternoon. It's kind of a life skills class, and I had folks ranging from 18 all the way to mid 60s, and I noticed there was a reverse relationship between wisdom and understanding of technology. So I feel you on the comment about folks need to be in person and online learning being a factor. Can you talk a little bit about our non-traditional students, folks in the workforce, folks that are coming out of the justice system? What are you seeing, hearing with with those folks?
Let me first talk about the justice system and the numbers of folks who have been incarcerated. And I got a figure this morning that I had to even question, but it's a good figure. We have second chance bail, and the second chance bail is really focusing in on those folks who are actually incarcerated to take classes through us. MATC, Milwaukee, and us are the only ones at this point who are doing second chance play. This is our first, the first term will be the fall term. We already have 600 registered work classes. That's huge when we start at 0 and going to 600. When we think about the adult basic education, as you just said, we do a lot of work in adult basic education. We took a huge hit in our ABE program because many of those students who are trying to get their high school diploma, they're coming back and trying to figure out, where do I go? Because I know I don't have X skill. How are we going to actually help them and be more encouraging to them coming back? And what we've done for the summer as well as the fall, we have increased our in-person classes, usually in those areas of ABE, because it is so very important, adult basic education. And also our high school completion program. Now, you've got many students in there who are 30, 35, 40, and up. And this is something that they want to be able to get. And doing that type of work. We also know that we have numbers of students who are second language learners. And again, that relationship with that instructor was huge for them. And we need to be able to return to what we were doing in that space. And again, as I said before, we are increasing those classes, focus in on those populations as well. Those are the things that we're doing right now for those populations that I don't want to say at risk, but I think we all are at risk. And those populations are important for us because they have been the most impacted from the pandemic and the social issues that we have faced. And I think Dr. Jenkins said this, is since the start of the country. And we're trying to deal with those issues in our small way that we can. So that's how we're moving forward with those populations.
So really honing in more of your resources on who needs it most, which is really true equity. I appreciate that. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. Dr. O'Connor, you mentioned the fact that you're learning from, our other panelists. I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask either one of them a question that you have sort of based on, what you've heard today.
Certainly. Just thinking back to, some of the journey that you have made, what would you tell, or what would you want to know someone who's coming fresh out of high school? If you were going back in time, actually, I'll take that back to when you were 18 or 19 or years old. What is one thing you would want them, someone to understand as they make their journey in their own life, as they're young adults becoming to older adults?
One of the things I would tell someone or tell myself if I was 18 or 19 again, to care. Care about the individual. Care about the folks who come in with you and behind you. Oftentimes as students, we don't feel that they really have your best interest or they care about what's happening. And I think that is so very important because it helps you move forward. We all know if you've got the love and you've got the care that someone's given to you, you're going to do some things that are awesome. They're marvelous. And that's what we want. That's what we want for all of our students. That's what we wanted for our own children. And to continue to do that. That care and loving is huge. And for them to feel it.
Dr. Jenkins? Oh, mute.
Well, I just said thank you for that, Dr. Daniels, and that was a great question from you, Dr. O'Connors. And I think about I always run with a crowd that's much older when I was younger, coming into education, and one of my partners was like 78, right? And here I was, 26. And he said, "Young man, I see a lot of potential in you." He said, "Remember this, it's not how fast you get there. It's how much of a difference you make on the way there. Don't rush to get there. Enjoy every moment of where you are." He said, "You are developmentally appropriate." And I'm telling you, I was young and I was fiery and I wanted to change the world by midnight like Pinky. He said, "It is meant for you to enjoy every moment of it." He said, "Not just your successes, but for you to gain wisdom through your challenges." And he said, "It wouldn't be appropriate for you and I to sit on the same bench and you have an equal knowledge as I have." He had been a veteran, Mr. Clarence Lumpkin. Man, was he a man of men. And I know I'd probably never rise to his level. And as he said, I would tell an 18, 19-year-old now, just enjoy it, every step of it, every day, because you can't get that back. You can't get being 18 back, and try to make a difference along the way in assisting others, and not let this ride be just about yourself. And I think it'll be okay. But I also like to say to the other young people that because you see a Dr. O'Connor, you see a Dr. Daniels, and Dr. Daniels has said it a couple of times. He didn't just get there overnight, and 24 years in the job, but he had a journey. The journey is important. So please don't just try to jump, as Mr. Lumpkin said for me, from where you are at your young age to where you see someone else standing and not knowing that there are going to be some good days and bad days. And you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
So we got a question from the audience. Thank you both. That was some game right there. I appreciate the wisdom. This is a question from the audience. It's directed at both Dr. Daniels and Dr. Jenkins. It's a two-part question. Part one is, does the high achievement gap in MMSD affect Madison College? And then the second part is, what formal partnerships are there between the school district and the college to close those gaps?
Well, I could definitely speak from the early part of it, Doc, if you don't mind on this one. Let me just say, when it comes to the gaps, or what gaps, and I think about things in terms of intentionality of what has occurred. There is a lot of potential in our students, and maybe when we look at the particular standardized assessments and we see those gaps, right? Those things are very structural. They happen from infancy, and I'm going back to the beginning of our American society. Some of those things does not measure the value or the potential of individuals. But we do realize the society we're in, and we realize that we want to increase our students' skill sets. So we're focusing hard on early literacy and beyond. We have many other programs going on that are articulation programs that are going to support our students not only graduate from high school. Some will graduate and maybe don't have, from a standardized assessment, haven't demonstrated that level of skill set. But we do know that they have other potential. And the great thing with us, we also have students who may have aspirations in various areas of math and science. And I'm quite sure Dr. Daniels is going to mention our STEM program and partnership we have. But there are various programs we have that are articulation, but it impacts not only just Madison College, our society, when we think about from a psychological standpoint, what we've done when we continue to talk about what our students don't have versus what they do have. So take it away from just the regular assessment. As we know, we have students who have left MMSD going to Madison College. Then they went in and matriculated over to UW or other places throughout the state of the country. And I just ask people to think about what can we do to reshape that, putting the appropriate resources in our system. And I think this last referendum passing did a great deal for us in terms of on our operational side, so we can continue to support some of the things we're trying to do to increase the academic achievement of our students. Is way beyond just the facilities. The facilities are great, and we're so appreciative of that from our taxpayers. But I think right now, as we look at our partnerships beyond just the STEM program and engaging our children in higher level of learning, we're very pleased with some of the partnerships we have with Madison College. And Doc, I just had to put that piece out there first before you start.
I think as a community college, as we are, we take students wherever they come and provide them what they need. And this is irregardless of where they're coming from. And I think that's our responsibility. But we know we need to build these strong bridges between our K-12 and us. And we have dual credit programs. We have other relationships that we have with our institutions. With Madison Metropolitan School District, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe, we started to craft what would that STEM Academy look like. And we have a strong STEM Academy and a strong partnership in MSD regarding it. We started with 100 students, and there were 100 juniors, and it became 100 juniors and 100 seniors. And now we have 200 roughly. And when you think about those students, they are primarily students of color or women, girls. And as we have seen their success, we know that the average number of college credits that they receive after coming through the STEM Academy is somewhere between 48 and 52. That's important to understand because it takes 60 to transfer to the university with a AA or an AS degree. And they're doing that because we have numbers of students who actually have received their AA or AS degree from Madison College through the STEM Academy who are transferring as full juniors. And that's huge for many different reasons. But as we talk about the future, those academies, it's just not about STEM. And it should be about other areas from which we can engage students so that they're on that pathway to where the STEM students are moving to. And those could be in business, it could be in structure, it could be in, the health area, any of those types of things. And it's going to be important for us as we look at our communities to provide that type of partnership. And then students know what they can go and achieve. We're giving them a goal to achieve. And I think that's going to be important as we continue to walk down these paths.
Yeah, and now I would just like to add to that, what Madison College does in terms of just for our students is bigger than just the numbers that's on their back when they leave out of here in terms of their test scores. They give them hope. And so when they give them hope, we have many students who thought they were not even ready for college level work. And we're looking at Madison College and the way that they mentor with our students. Our students go there who you thought were they barely graduated out of high school. They were able to obtain their associate's degrees and move on. And some articulated skilled trades. That's huge. And we have this notion that everyone has to go and complete a 4-year degree. That's not accurate. I have many students and many friends who have gone on and having successful lives now. And Madison College gives us that pathway to that. So I'm looking forward to working with Dr. Daniels and his staff and our staff continuing to build upon this partnership.
Yeah, those are incredible programs. My only critique is bring the STEM Academy over to Verona area school district. I got a freshman that's going to be coming in soon. Thank you.
Are underway.
Yes. All right. Good to hear. So thank you all. I really appreciate the wisdom that you all have shared, not just from a a professional standpoint, but also just from a personal, it came from the heart. I'm going to drop a little statistic before I close. Was doing research for work, went on the DPI website, and found out that out of our over 800,000 K through 12 students in the state of Wisconsin, 31.2% of them are students of color. So, even though Wisconsin is often seen as a very white state, it's about 80% white. We're becoming more and more diverse, and it's really going to be critical that we attain and address the needs of our students of color, particularly our young men, but also see the value, the wisdom, the assets that they have to bring to the table, and really learn and gain from those assets as well. So Dr. Daniels, Dr. Jenkins, Dr. O'Connor, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you all, and I appreciate you for taking the time to speak with us today in our audience.
Joe, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
This is 365 Media.